Well, hello again. Welcome again to another episode of Down to Earth, but Heavenly Minded. I'm your host, Risch. And today we're going to continue on in our study in the book of Genesis. And in this study here, we're going to be looking at the life of Lot. So the title of our episode today is Studies in the Life of Lot, and it's in Genesis 13. But let's backtrack a little bit. Go back to Genesis 12, verse 10, and it informs us that Abraham and Lot went down into Egypt. And verse 1 tells us that Abraham went up out of Egypt, and Lot accompanied him. But we'll see in a moment that he left his heart in Egypt. Well, when Lot accompanied him, he did leave his heart in Egypt. Notice that the contrast between Abraham and Lot, and there's quite a difference. Abraham walked by faith. Lot walked by sight. Abraham was kind in God conscience. He thought about God all the time, but Lot was greedy and worldly. Abraham looked for a city where the builder and maker was God, but Lot made his home in a city built by man and destroyed by God. Abraham was made a hero of the world, and the curtain fell upon Lot with all its possession destroyed in Sodom, and himself dwelling in a cave. Well, there's quite a contrast. Well, the life of Lot was a tragic one. It really was. And today, there's a lot of Christians that are living tragic lives. You know, if you think about the strife between the herdsmen of Lot and the herdsmen of Abraham, you would think that this was the cause of the problem. But not really. In verses 8 and 9, Abraham proposed to Lot an ultimatum. And verses 10 and 11 tells us that Lot chose. He lifted up his eyes. What did he do? He was living by sight. This was the beginning of Lot's spiritual death, which ended in shame. The eye gate is one of the avenues through which temptation shall assail the soul. John said, all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eye and the pride of life, these are not of the Father, but of the world. Walking by sight is the cause of most of our failures and sorrows. It was so at the beginning. Eve saw that the fruit was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eye, and she took and ate. Genesis 3:6. And then Achan's confession was this: I saw the goodly Babylonian garments, and a wedge of gold, and the 50 shekels of weight, and the 200 shekels of silver. Then I coveted them, and I took them, and I saw, I coveted, I took. 3 things. He saw, he coveted, and he took. Lot's experience was no different from many others. He lifted up his eyes and beheld the plains. He saw that it was like the garden of the Lord, and the best of the land of Egypt. Lot's heart was still in Egypt. God saw something very different. And verse 13, the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly. Lot was not seeing the way God sees. Let us now consider Lot's stay in Sodom. Note the downward steps of the deluded man. Just look at verses 11 and 12. And let's look at some points. 1, he lifted up his eyes and beheld. 2, he chose all the plains of Jordan. 3, he separated himself from Abraham. 4, he pitched his tent toward Sodom. 5, he dwelt in Sodom. 6, finally, we see him so involved in the life of Sodom that they made him a judge. And 7, tragedy of tragedies, we find his daughters married to men of Sodom. You know, like leprosy, sin has, after a small beginning, but now rapid its spread. How loathsome the issue, how dreadful the end. Peter's denial was no sudden, isolated act, but was the climax of a series of events. Let's look at these events. 1, there was boasting of self-confidence. Though all shall flee, I will not run away. 2, then there was the sleep in the garden when he should have been watching and praying. 3, then there was the following of Christ afar off. 4, then there was the warning of himself at the world's finish. And 5, amidst these evil men, he denied his Lord with an oath of cursing. Well, what did Lot gain by the separation from Abraham and his sojourning into Sodom? Nothing at all. He was a loser. Consider now Lot's deliverance from Sodom. God never gave Lot up. God warned Lot. Genesis 14 tells us that the defeat of the kings of Sodom. Lot is taken prisoner. He lost all his possessions and might also have lost his life. Where Abraham delivered them and Lot had recovered all his possessions, he returned right back to Sodom. There we leave him. In the meantime, the evening and the events of Genesis 18 and 19 take place. Abraham is visited by heavenly visitors, 2 angelistic companies of the Lord. And this is the Theophasis. This was Christ himself. Eventually, the 2 angels proceed to Sodom. The Lord himself remained behind, and Abraham intercede with him on behalf of the righteousness in the city. When the angels came to Sodom, they found Lot sitting in the gate. They were reluctant to accept his hospitality. How far can a backslider wander from God? See 19, verse 8. He was willing to sacrifice his 2 daughters to the wicked men of Sodom to secure his own provision and peace. Verse 14 described for us the powerlessness of his testimony. There was no power left in his testimony. He had no testimony. Lot had utterly lost his testimony. His sons-in-law would not believe him. In gaining influence in the world, he had lost the power even in his own family. The next morning, the angels urged Lot to take his wife and 2 daughters and flee from the doomed city. Verse 15. But in verse 16, Lot was reluctant to leave. His heart was in Sodom. The angel took them by the hand and rushed them outside the city. In verse 17, escape for your lives. Look not behind you, neither stay in the plains. Well, Lot's wife had also left her heart behind in the cities. She looked back and was turned into a pillar of salt. Now, consider Lot, as he was with Abraham and his flock and hands and tents, verse 5 of chapter 14. The final picture of Lot, in this case in the mountains with his 2 daughters. Chapter 19, verse 30. He was bankrupt, destitute. He lost his wife, son-in-laws, and left to face the fruit of his own awful sin. Then lastly, look at the proud, prestigious judge of Sodom. Oh, what a sorry sight. Here he was, mortally drunk, totally incapable, hopelessly inbred, committing the heinous sin at the drop of a hat for his daughter whom he had trained in Sodom. What a sin. The way of transgression is hard. Proverbs 13:15. There are a lot of Lot Christians in the world today. This is a warning. Turn back to God. Do not trust in the world. Do not lean on your own understanding. Well, that ends our session for today. The end.